This is Eternity Mode's biggest update ever, so here's everything you need to know in 7 minutes. Not only will this include complete boss reworks with even a new boss, but also addresses some frustrating issues to make the experience more enjoyable. So let's get into it by first talking about the brand new boss, the Cursed Coffin. This is intended to be fought post Eye of Cthulhu and takes place inside a new room within the world's desert pyramids. It works by moving around the arena whilst casting various different projectiles, like this move, which opens the coffin to release a bunch of gemstones. It can also cast these hands that converge towards the player, or stomp down to release a shockwave of sand. Honestly, for an early game boss, the attacks are very creative and fun to dodge. It gives any new players of Fargo's a gist of the bullet hell type nature. I also really appreciate how it's not completely overloaded with bright projectiles, and the fight is pretty straightforward. I would love an extra phase where maybe we could get a better look at the cursed spirit with more varying attacks. But you may have also noticed the updated King Slime Slasher used in this fight, and we'll cover all the epic weapon changes later in this video. As for now, we have the Coffin's boss drops. The Accursed Ankh is a tool which, whilst held up, increases life regen and debuff effectiveness at the cost of 10 less defense. The Nekata is a Summoner Whip, which struck enemies cause Shadow Flame explosions. The Gilded Scepter is a mage weapon, and rapidly creates these orbs at your mouse cursor, which can then be activated to chase after the nearest enemy. If you draw a circle with its projectiles before releasing, the damage will be much stronger. The Spirit Longbow, which converts arrows into special spectral ones that leave lingering spirit flames behind them. And my personal favourite, the Sisyphean Gauntlet, which while you're on the ground, you can pick up a boulder and hurl it towards your cursor for big bursts of damage. Some useful early game drops, but next up on the list is visual upgrades, with the biggest overhaul being the Abomination, equipped with new shaders, sprites, sound effects. I really love in particular this Solar Eclipse arena border, which will make seeing the projectiles so much easier. The same thing can be said for the Mutant, with also a new arena. If I'm not mistaken, the attacks basically remain the same, but one thing you'll notice is the declutter of enchantments, moreover on the enchantment section. And now we'll take a look at boss reworks, mainly 4 of the most significant in this update. The Brain of Cthulhu you may have remembered as being one of the most controversial Eternity Mode bosses, with its second phase completely nuking you with debuffs. With this rework, not only will its attacks be way more clear, with telegraphed visuals and sound indicators, but the boss itself will be more intuitive for the player. No more random teleports or clones, it's very clear what's going on. And you'll notice this pattern throughout this 1.7 update, addressing key pain points of Eternity Mode. As for the corruption counterpart, Eternity Eater of Worlds has received a new attack, which will cause it to circle around the player, while segments lash out towards you, adding more variation to its attacks. As for Eternity Twins, its phase 1 has been completely changed from the old version. No longer will the fight just begin in phase 2 like vanilla, but have some unique attacks to make it more challenging to fight. This includes orb disc attacks, or extended dashes that get you to move around more. A major highlight of this fight is its Death Ray spin, which has been reworked to have Retinase's laser rotate one way, while Spasmatism fires its orbs in the opposite direction, making for a more interesting attack to dodge. And as for Lifelight, this has been reworked or changed countless times, being covered quite frequently in my previous Terraria mod recaps. I really love how the theme of Hallowed is showcased throughout the fight, as you have its dash attacks that spawns in pixies, or the Terra Prisma converging towards the player. This boss is filled to the brim with colourful and bright attacks, and the mechanic of the gemstones feel more cohesive now. Now, what about Overloaders? This was the item in the previous iteration, summoning a swarm of 10 bosses at a time. This new rework to the Overloader item will now craft into energized summons. This will cause all boss consumables in the stack to be used, with the more being consumed, the stronger the boss will be. At a 5 stack, the boss will be much faster, and let's just say you have 100 stacked King Slime summons, well, he just becomes the Slime God, one-shotting the player. Remember, there are heaps of changes, which for the sake of time can't be covered all in this video, so I highly suggest you boot up another Eternity Mode playthrough. So moving past all these insane boss changes, this update has also seen changes to Eternity's environmental mechanics. Not to necessarily make it less difficult, but just to become more fair to play, if that makes any sense. Looking at possibly the most frustrating example has to be the Underground Hallowed. If you've played in any previous version, the flipped gravity was by far the worst experience of my life, and I'm so glad it has been changed to this illuminated debuff instead, where spawn rates are increased, and these bright spots increase your damage taken and dealt. It's still a spike in difficulty for exploring underground, but doesn't make it annoying, which I really like. Another similar example is the Celestial Pillars, which in the old version, you had to use the same class weapon on the particular pillar. So take for example the Nebula Pillar, you had to use a mage weapon. This has been changed so that non-matching classes are instead weaker rather than just completely unplayable. And speaking of unplayable, this segues perfectly into the insane accessories, mainly enchantments and forces that completely clutter your screen and make it difficult to play the game properly. Yes, there are presets, but you've worked so hard for this accessory, only to disable most of its effects. That kinda sucks. So this has been changed so that most overloaded items will now be more cohesive and be a singular effect that will hopefully reduce the stuff flying across the screen. I'll leave you with the hundreds of reworked combinations you can try, but here's a side-by-side example with the Force of the Cosmos. As you can see, the various effects are either merged or changed to feel more special, rather than just simple inherited effects. Some enchantments that are compatible also have new UIs and indicators, aimed to give you a more clear visual on the uptime of your enchantments. Examples include the Meteor enchantment, the Solar enchantment, and the Sparkling Adoration's grazing mechanic. But now, let's talk about weapon reworks, with the most prominent being the Slime Sword line. The Slime King Slasher now being transformed into a true melee style weapon, with custom swing animations and creating slime explosions on hit. And the update to this weapon is the Slime Slinging Slasher, available at Post Moonlord, inheriting the new custom swing style, slime explosions, and altering its behavior of its projectiles. As for new weapon drops, we've already mentioned the Cursed Coffin, but we also have the Voltaic Chain that is dropped from the Destroyer, a summoner whip that causes minions to fire chain lightning to nearby enemies. The Destroyer is the upgraded version of the Voltaic Chain, where you can hit your own minions to fire a laser at nearby enemies. For every 20th swing, the Destroyer will break loose and track your mouse for 5 seconds, just completely decimating everything on screen. And the last weapon I'll showcase is the Umbra, a melee spear which can stab close enemies, releasing spectral energy. Its right click allows you to toss the spear, and this can be charged up for even stronger attacks. So that was just 7 minutes of this massive Fargo Souls mod update. Check out the Discord for more info, and goodbye.